As the new month begins, we're stepping into February with a conversation that forces us to reflect on justice, life, and the kind of society we are building. Today, we're opening a conversation that sits right at the intersection of justice, morality, and how we value human life. The death penalty remains part of Nigeria's legal system, yet it continues to divide opinions across the country. Some Nigerians see it as a necessary deterrent, a firm response to violent crime in a time of growing insecurity. Others believe it is outdated, irreversible, and incompatible with justice in a system where mistakes, inequality, and long trials are common. So today, we're not just debating laws in abstract. Does the death penalty make us safer? Does it deliver justice? Or does it raise deeper concerns about fairness, accountability, and the power of the state? As always on Jasiri, we're listening to different perspectives, lived experiences, and the uncomfortable truth that often gets ignored. But first, now don't forget to join the conversation via our WhatsApp number that is popping up on the screen right now. Before our main conversation, let's give you an update on a story of grave national importance. More details are emerging about the coup plot that wanted to take out President Bola Tinubu and a number of key members of the government. Now, according to Premium Times, 40 suspects have been identified, including senior military officers, a police officer, and civilians, all allegedly involved in funding, intelligence gathering, logistics, and propaganda. Now, the plot was said to have been planned as far back as 2023 and later revived in 2025. Several arrests have been made, while some suspects are reportedly still at large, with one said to have fled to South America.
And let's not forget that the former governor, Timipre Silva, has also been implicated in the plot. He is yet to return to the country months after his Abuja residences were raided by operatives of the Defense Intelligence Agency. It was reported that the raid was connected with investigations into the alleged coup attempt against President Bola Tinubu. Aside from the president, key targets include Vice President Kazim Shettima, Senate President Godswill Akpabio, Speaker of the House of Representatives Tajuddin Abbas, Minister of Defense General Christopher Musa, who revealed that he was listed to be arrested, shot if resisted, and other military officers and service chiefs. Do you know that even in this, because if they're naming people that are within the villa, that means everybody would be investigated. I'm sure everyone that works, even to the cleaners. Forget the ranks of people. You'll be very surprised the kind of people that can give information. Because you might even be you don't ignore them.
Exactly.
Yes, you don't think they're anything serious.
And who is actually to say that these are not just scapegoats and something deeper isn't going to happen?
But because of the kinds of people who have been named, you know that these ones are key players.
Well, talking about those that were named, when 16 people were listed, we talked about how, most of them were Northerners. With the 40 people listed, it still didn't change the fact that most of them are still Northerners. So what is it that the North is actually lacking that they were not given? If it was even
given as in how?
Okay, we're talking about now when you're talking about sharing of power and everything. The North also has it, right? After Tinubu's tenure ends, hopefully the North will take over, right? So what is it that they're being given that they don't lack, that they actually lack?
I don't think it's about anything.
They don't lack anything. Why are they so involved in the
especially when you think of the 2020, especially when you think about the fact that they said this goes back to 2023. That was in the time of the handover from Buhari.
From Buhari, exactly. So what is it?
It's just coming from 8 years.
Yes. So what could he have done at that time?
Exactly what I'm asking.
And for you to know that sometimes maybe the military or the people involved just feel like, it's time that we reset things. Every time we had a military intervention, it's as if it's an intervention they're doing for the people, and they feel that
But it never ended up being for the people's best interest.
An intervention. Things get worse because there's no administration that doesn't come with its fair share of challenges and troubles that they have to sum out. And the challenges that Nigeria is having now, it didn't start with Tinubu. It is like, when you say cancer,
but it wasn't.
Maybe when it wasn't about first a stage 1 cancer. and maybe by now we are nearing maybe
it's endemic.
It's endemic.
You know, when they talk about
rot.
When they talk about ripple effects, this is what we're seeing, right? It's been happening, you know, all over Africa, and then we're seeing this. We saw this in Cotonou a few weeks or months ago. You know, now we're seeing it in Nigeria. And did you know that even nearby Niger a few days ago, the airports, you know, were bombed and IS and all that. So what is actually going on?
But you know, Africa, I can't lie, Africa is a bit dissatisfied with their leadership. Because if you look at the trajectory, we have a lot of old presidents in Africa. People who are refusing to relinquish power when they should. Of course, there will be agitation amongst the people. And when there's agitation, it goes not from just the lowest ranks, even to the highest ranks. Everybody is just looking for what can we do to just change things.
Will we ever get to a point where, you know, when people protest, the government will be like, oh no, these people are not happy about us being in office, let's all resign? In Nigeria.
I don't know.
We've seen that happen in Belgium.
You know, it recently happened was it Thailand or Malaysia, but you know the people had to take to the streets. I can never forget the video of, I think, was it a minister or somebody having to evacuate his house with a helicopter and having left his family behind.
Yeah.
So there is, and don't forget that the power of social media is also there when it shows people how either citizens are changing government or maybe toppling government, but it's showing dissatisfaction, a global dissatisfaction with the status quo, whether it is in leadership, it's in the financial systems, it's in global immigration, it's in globalization, or now a move to nationalization that we're seeing. It's a lot. And I think leaders across the continent need to take cognizance of it. You have the youngest population anywhere in the world. They're growing up without being able to hope and dream.
Yes.
They're growing up without being able to buy land, build houses, do the things you did.
They've seen us hope and dream. They've seen us hope and dream. And we're not there yet.
And they've seen the decadence that they've grown into. And you know, this new generation, they don't have tolerance.
They don't.
Like us that like to
time.
be
Yes, they don't.
This new crop of
we are
people,
long suffering.
Yes, we are long sufferers. We're long sufferers. But this young group of people, they are not. And they are seeing it happen in other clients too. We might think it's not going to happen, but I feel sometimes the drums are beating closer because we can hear it.
Lolo, have you seen the protests happening in the U.S.? Aside that, now I think the question that a lot of people are actually asking right now is what will happen to these people that have been enlisted?
I don't want to know.
I don't want to get we don't know. The civilian should have a civilian trial. And then, of course, the military officials, Navy, Air Force. Remember that it's mainly Army, but it did
encompass
little. So there's going to be court-martialing, and we can talk about the court-martialing process and all that later. But it is something we'll continue to give you updates on because it is, as we said, as Dashin said, it is a matter of grave national importance. And I think, again, people need to remember that the price of democracy is eternal vigilance. You can see what happens in the United States. Don't go to sleep thinking that, oh, we have a democracy and everything's perfect. You have to constantly fine-tune, refine, fight for your democracy, make it better year in year, election cycle. As more people come into it, you need to make that democracy work for them. And I think that's the note we'll end this conversation on. We have a big conversation coming up.
We have a very big conversation coming up. It remains one of the most controversial punishments in our laws, the death penalty. For some, it represents justice and accountability. For others, it raises troubling questions about fairness, human life, and the power of the state. Is it justice or a failure of justice? After the break, we'll return with the voices, the perspectives, and the hard questions shaping the debate across Africa, across Nigeria. Liborous Oshoma, constitutional lawyer, joins us after the break. You know it's going to be an amazing conversation. Stay with us.
The killing of a woman and her 6 children shocked Nigerians and reopened one of Nigeria's most difficult debates, the death penalty. In the aftermath, there have been loud calls for execution. One of the suspect's fathers has publicly said his son deserves the full punishment, while the Emir of Kano has also called for capital punishment, arguing that some crimes are so heinous that death is the only just response. But beyond the emotion, Nigeria is already one of the countries with the highest number of people on death row, with more than 3,600 death row inmates, many of them waiting for years, some for decades, amid concerns about delays, weak investigations, and wrongful convictions. Globally, the trend is moving in the opposite direction. The United Nations continues to push for universal abolition, warning that the death penalty is irreversible, discriminatory, and does not deter crime. So is the death penalty about justice or vengeance? Does it make society safer? And what does a justice system look like for victims, families, and the state? Joining us now is a friend of the House, someone we look to make sense of the law, the Constitution, and things happening in Nigeria. Barrister Liborous Oshoma is a constitutional lawyer, and it's good to have you back on Jasiri. It's still February, it's early February, but we can still say Happy New Year, because we have not seen you.
Yes, we haven't seen you on the show
I've not seen you this year. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Always my pleasure here.
It's a pleasure. So when crimes are horrific, emotions run high. You know, calls for the death penalty often come from a place of grief, anger, and a desire for justice. But tell me, Barrister, is justice and punishment the same thing? Because when people call for the death penalty, you know, after a crime like the one that happened in Kano State, what do you think they're really asking for? Is it justice, is it closure, or is it retribution?
Yeah, let me start by just quickly take you to section 33 of the 1999 Constitution as amended. Fundamental right. Say every person has a right to life, and no one shall be deprived intentionally of his life, save in execution of the sentence of a court in respect of a criminal offense of which he has been found guilty in Nigeria. A person shall not be regarded as having been deprived of his life in contravention of this section if he dies as a result of the use to such extent and in such circumstances as are permitted by law of such force as is reasonably necessary for the defense of any person from unlawful violence or for the defense of property, in order to effect a lawful arrest or to prevent the escape of a person lawfully detained, or for the purpose of suppressing a riot, insurrection, or mutiny. And this section, criminal lawyers and constitutional lawyers will tell you that this is the section that actually, you know, lay the foundation for death penalty in Nigeria. So that means a court can actually sentence someone to death. But world over, people had them, you know, consistently look at the, you know, legal parameters surrounding death penalty. I will come to Nigeria and we find out that when somebody dies, the question is it that person that is suffering or those people who, you know, he left behind? So it's like you just help that person to extinguish the pains. Mm-hmm. And so he's gone, you know. And that's why some people will tell you it's not just death. And so people even commit suicide. Suicide, for example, to attempt to commit suicide is a criminal offense.
Yeah.
But when you succeed,
Nothing
happens. You know, you've succeeded, you're gone. So, and that's why, you know, there's this campaign for the abolition of death penalties. And then you now look at the religion angle here. If you bring it here, people are like, "Oh, I don't want their blood in my hands." But yet,
I don't want to, because we need to talk about the governors.
Wait, I'm coming to that. Yet, these people, their supporters are committing crimes, you know, that is even worse than death penalty, all in the name of politics, and yet they say they don't want the blood in their hands. But that's a discussion for another day. But in this case, people think that most times, you know, punishment is justice. And that's why when we say now Nigeria has decided to change the name of their prisons to correctional center, because the essence of every government is the welfare and the security of the people. And so even when you are a deviant in the society, there are penalties. But that penalty is also to ensure that at the end of the day, your behavior, your attitude is corrected. But also, you have to also look at the victim in this crime. What is justice for the victim? Mm-hmm. What is justice to you might not be justice to me. Yeah. So that's why when the law talks about law and justice, and they will tell you there is nothing like absolute justice. But what the society would perceive to be justice in each case varies. So for somebody that had lost someone, for some persons, over time they can tell you, well, since the law had taken its course and we have seen punishment melted out to that person, to them that's justice. It might not foreclose the crime, but justice had been done. And that's why the law says, let justice be done, if even the heavens will fall. But you know that, of course, the heavens will fall. But also you say, you know, justice should be seen to be manifestly done. Yeah. Not just what you perceive to be. And then we use the reasonable man test to determine, we know what that justice would be. And so in the eyes of the reasonable man, what should happen? If somebody who murdered another person, and then you sentence that person to life imprisonment with hard labor. Certainly, some persons are going to look at it and say, yes, justice is manifestly done in this case. Because if the person dies, you can still say justice has been done, but at the other end is the pain you are going through being alive. Is that person alive to go through the same pain that he has put you through? And in some cases, you find out that some of this person ends up being used as instruments for reforms after they had been reformed. But that's the argument for and against. And then, but if you now come to our, law, once a court, because it has to do with life, a right to life, is fundamental, it's inalienable. Once a court passes a sentence, a death sentence, you also need the concurrence of the executive for that sentence to be implemented.
We're coming to that.
You know, every time you see a law being done, of course there must be a rationale or a purpose to the reason why that law was put in place in the first place. Let's look at it from a legal standpoint. What is the purpose of this death penalty, even in our laws in the first place? Is it like because we're just taking it from maybe the British Constitution, as we've also always followed, or why?
No, the one thing about law is that it's dynamic. It changes. And what was a law years ago, today, take, for example, even in the British system, prostitution at a point was, soliciting was even, a crime. But today, it's no longer, it's legalized, So it's the same thing with so many jurisdictions. There are some, events that will overtake certain laws. And there are also some convention that over time becomes law that before now were not law. So the essence of the law in the first place was to protect the sanctity of human. No one, just drawing inference from both the Bible and the Quran, that no one has a right to take the life of another because you didn't make that life. And so if you take the life of another, your life shall also be taken. And when you are in a society where people like life, and that fear of, oh, look, if I do this, that means mine also will be taken. But over time, they discovered that it wasn't deterring people enough. And rather, it is the fear that I would spend my entire life, I'll be alive, I'll spend my entire life in isolation to suffer the consequences of my act. That deters people more than when you say.
Does it really?
Yes, it does. Yes, it is. It does more, much more. Not in jurisdictions where you have parole. Not in jurisdictions where you have parole. And so there's this campaign for the abolition of that penalties. That look, and then another big thing is, yes, you say law is the law would do everything to ensure that justice is meted out. But also, remember the Supreme Court once said that we are not infallible because we are final, but we are final because we are infallible. So in this case, what if there are cases where the law will also be making a mistake? What if there is a mistake? So, and we say it is better for 99
guilty men to go
than for one innocent person to go for a crime that is, So you find that in some cases also, people also have risen. There are people who have been condemned to death and executed for a crime that they didn't commit. And years later, you now discover that if this person was alive, you probably would have been free now, by now, because they didn't commit those crimes. So all of these reviews, you know, encourage the campaign for the eradication of death penalties. But in Nigeria, you still come back to that religion, you know, and
morality,
all of those,
and yes. So you know, you have actually answered the next question we had in terms of the real risk of executing an innocent person in Nigeria, and I think that's tied to issues around poor investigations, forced confessions, or even a lack of legal representation. What role do you think those things possibly play in death row cases in Nigeria?
You see, even in America, in civilized, you know, sophisticated, you know, jurisdiction, where, because we say investigation, prosecution actually starts from investigation. In sophisticated society, where you have sophisticated policing, there are still slips, they still make mistakes.
Follow the Innocence Project and you'll know.
So when you have such scenario, you now bring it to a country where your investigation is wishy-washy, and in most cases, unlike other jurisdictions where you investigation is concluded before arrest is made. But here, arrest is made ab initio, even before investigation. And then in some cases, you are asked to confess that you committed the crime. And that's why when you get to court, you will, even your confessional statement, you know, becomes non-admissible, because you raise a defense of, I didn't make it voluntary. I was beaten.
I was coerced.
I was coerced. So in such scenario, what happens is, there's need for you to review the penalties, because some of these things can happen. And when you now condemn some, especially here also, our crime, we perceive crime even when they have not been committed. You see somebody from the way he's dressed, you say, oh no, this person must be a criminal. You know, it's perception. You know, so when you have all of that, you need to also reform your laws to ensure that, you know, innocent citizens are not summarily just executed for crime they did not commit. And so that's why some persons have argued. But another thing is, here, you also need to ensure that your surveillance is technologically enhanced, so that you don't remove the fact that you have this deterrence, you know, also consistently had helped some persons. But the way, what is the value of the human life here?
Barrister,
before you now begin to talk about protecting that human life and execution.
Let's even look at Nigeria, because I always say that everything about us is peculiar. A lot of things about Nigeria and our justice system, of course we have a lot of things that we can do better at. But should a justice system that struggles with timely trials, first, be trusted with irreversible punishment? That is on one side. And I just want to know, are there documented cases where, you know, convictions have been overturned after a death roll, especially in Nigeria? I've seen it in other crimes. I don't know if we have case law that, you know, backs that in Nigeria.
You know, for once, there are some things I want to say now, but anyway, I will say that we've seen cases where, we've heard of cases where prisoners are swapped.
Yes.
Yes.
Prisoners are swapped. Somebody commits an offense or commits a crime and is sentenced, and then you hear that, you know, he has been swapped, especially if you have the wherewithal to do all of those things. And then you find out that for people to go in, for people who are condemned to death in Nigeria, even if in some cases, some minor cases, even when they have the wherewithal to handle it, it's most especially difficult when the evidence is overwhelming. And for you to get to that level, you know, that crime must have been so heinous and overwhelming and notorious. And it becomes very difficult for a review of maybe new evidence, because here, our crimes are reported first on social media even before, you know, the police starts investigation. Before now, I can't remember in my criminal law if there had been any, like in any of such cases in Nigeria, where somebody was committed to death and then, you know, a review, new evidence emerged and they discovered that he actually didn't commit the crime. But I've seen cases where we're in court and the case is overwhelming. The case of the prosecutor is strong and very, very strong, only for a new piece of evidence
to emerge
just before judgment.
Yes.
And then it will turn the whole thing. Let me give you an instance. Somebody says you forged a check to steal money, defraud somebody, steal money from an account. And then they presented newspaper cuttings and papers of where he was actually practicing the forgery. And by the time the newspapers were reviewed, these were newspapers of after the fact, after the alleged crime had been committed. You say this forgery took place in January 2015. But in court, the newspapers that were presented were newspapers of June 2015. How could somebody have been practicing a signature that he used in January by June 2015? So that will automatically twist, the case of the prosecutor. But for death and murder cases, I have not, seen any. But you hear that, because of the nature of our jurisprudence here. Even I remember there's a celebrated case of it's Ugozi and the state, a policeman who killed a returnee, a European returnee, years ago, in 1990 something. The Supreme Court finally, determined that matter and condemned the person to death. He's still in detention. The person is still in detention. And then another thing that is also not encouraging is when you see people who committed offenses or crime, and then those persons are condemned to death and they are granted pardon. Like the case of
presidential pardon.
Presidential pardon. For somebody who's been convicted by court of competent jurisdiction and is granted pardon. And so
just before
even if you eradicate death penalties, what such a pardon does for the society is that it encourages people that once you are up there, criminality
is a free-for-all, yeah.
All right, well, we will definitely discuss more on this, but we will pause here for now to take a short break. When we return, we'll continue unpacking these questions from deterrence and justice to faith, governance, and why governors are refusing to sign death warrants. Stay with us.
All right. Is there any credible evidence that the death penalty actually reduces violent crimes? If the deterrence worked, would Nigeria still be dealing with the rising cases of all the violent crimes that we're having, if it has ever worked? Because growing up, I remember I used to watch execution at the bar beach at that time.
What if you have death penalties like we have now, and the death penalties execution is not being carried out? What if you have death penalties and your criminal justice system like we have now also is wishy-washy? In cases where the cases are in court and you hear that the prosecutor will say, well, my witness is not in court. And in some cases they say, prosecutor or the IPO has been transferred. And then the DPP's advice takes eternity to come. And in some cases can even be compromised. So no matter the punishment for crime in such scenario, it becomes very difficult for you to actually deter crime and criminality. And that's why people can just take up arms against the state, and people will listen to them and tell you, oh, it's not the first to do it. What we need to do first and foremost is to strengthen our laws and the enforcement of these laws. Once you do that, people know that there are consequences for every action. That alone will deter crime. Then you now begin to talk about the severity of the punishment. A situation where somebody would steal ₦1 billion and that will directly lead to the death of so many because there is no direct link, there's no direct evidence to that death. You say, well, he can go for 5 years imprisonment. But somebody who kills another, and you say, oh, death penalty. So it is all of this that is also affecting people's perception of this penalty. And that's why in China, for example, they tell you, it's even worse for you when you steal public fund.
Yeah.
That's because for them, the implication, the far-reaching implication is that public fund could probably have led to the death of somebody.
Yes, absolutely.
So that one carries death penalty, and people are happy
that when you mismanage a public authority, then certainly you should go in for it. And that's what deters crime and criminality, not when you say, oh, death penalty in your books, but in your law to even investigate and convict somebody of the death penalty. It's a different ball game altogether. So that's where we need to marry the two. Societies where the prisons are few. Like you go to the Netherlands, you hear that,
And they said they were closing down prisons.
They're closing down
recently.
prisons because
Norway or Sweden, one of them, yeah.
Yes, because in those societies, the taxes, for example, is very high. But even the money you earn, you hardly do anything with it because the state takes responsibility for everything. So there will be no need for you to even want to commit crime. And when you commit crime, you're taken to the correctional center and you're appropriately corrected.
Rehabilitated, yes.
So that way, the society is sane. And but when you have a capitalist society like ours, where the craze is to make money and just make it irrespective of how you make it, people are going to cut corners, people are going to kill others, and then government also insensitivity to the plight of the everyday person. So that's where I think we actually need to draw the line and find a way to create a bridge where the people would actually feel governance. When you people feel governance, you don't need all of this.
When you talk about people, feeling governance, and also, you talked about severity of punishment earlier. Could harsh punishment distract, from addressing root causes like poverty, trauma, and also weak policing? Are we mistaking severity of punishment for effectiveness of justice?
No. The first and foremost, an angry man is a hungry man is an angry man. An angry man also is deprived of the complete, sense of reasonability, because in most cases, that anger takes over. He just wants to do what he needs to do. It is after, just like a bank account, when you withdraw, you lose interest. It is when you're done that, it dawns on you that, what have I done? Just like the Garden of Eden. Oh, when
after the
Adam
eating of the apple.
suddenly remember that he was naked. So, consequently also, here, when society fails to provide for its own, and then you have, like Fidel Castro once said, in a land of lawlessness, it becomes illegal to be law-abiding. So you now ask yourself, what is the law? And that's why Kanu and the market protesters will tell you, Omotosho, show me the law. Governor Soludo, show me the law. So what is the law? A situation where you say, do as I say, not as I do. So where lies the law, first and foremost? So you need to enforce the law, inclusive of you. Let it be applicable across the board.
All.
That way, you now begin to say, well, that's why some people will say, if he can apply the law to himself, then who you be? But when the law is selective, the justice is not blind, it sees. Then no matter the penalties, no matter the deterrence, people are still going to do it any which way. Because they will look at how I can compromise the law. I can compromise the system and ensure that I go scot-free. And because that man who is going to enforce also is hungry, he's not taken care of by the society, by the same system. The policeman is not properly catered for, and you are asking him to investigate a crime of 2 billion. They demand here's the money, 2 billion. If only I get 100 million from this. And then they give him 100 million. He says, don't worry. This is the beginning of the end of this case. Because the society has refused to provide for him. And then also, because the society has refused to provide for him, you are now asking him to go and enforce a law for the society. And you say, oh, death penalty. And he looks, the man who took 2 billion that led to the death of so many, what have we done to him? So these are the questions that the society first needs to answer before you begin to talk about, oh, how do we ensure that the law? But the law is still the law. Like we say, Dura less said less. The law is strict, but it's still the law. But it is the application of the law that's usually the problem. And because we say human beings are infallible, And so because of that. But if you agree that once you are placed on a position of a responsibility, and that responsibility includes you
Yes.
and the larger society, and we also don't operate a system where everybody, once you're in that position of responsibility, you deprive everybody, and then they come to you to ask for just a little handouts. Yeah. And then you're the only man with, who sit on top as the king. So that's why consistently implementing the laws in our climate becomes very difficult. Because what we have now, we've transmuted from, a monarchy system to a political monarchy, where we have tenured kings, And then, because in our society, we had this mentality of the king can do no wrong.
Yes. We transferred it from our culture
We transferred
and traditional
that mentality from our cultural belief to a political lifestyle. And then you now have, do you know who I am? Oh. He's the king. So, but we forget that in the ancient philosophy, the king is supposed to be unknowing. He's supposed to be above board. He's supposed to be a philosopher. That's why he's a philosopher king. And at that level, he should understand the law and how to apply it. And there should be checks, like the Yomesis.
Yes.
There should be checks. But here, we have completely forgotten those checks. And then we've forgotten what the king must be, the position he must attain before he becomes a king. And so anybody who wears a crown is now labeled the king. So a fool can become a king. And then you now ask him to come and enforce the law.
Wait. I know you're about to. You know that example you gave about the handouts? I remember hearing members of the National Assembly talk about how Nigerians come to ask them for school fees, ask them for hospital fees, ask them for all these things. And I'm thinking to myself, you sit to make the laws so that they wouldn't have to come to ask you. But many of them like the status quo. But let's talk about our leaders a little bit more. So we heard how Nigerians feel about the death penalty. And we know that Nigeria is a deeply religious and culturally diverse country. For many, views on the death penalty are shaped not by law books, but by faith, tradition, and moral belief systems. And it's not just the people who feel this way. It's the leaders too. Nigeria's last known judicial execution was carried out on December 23rd, 2016 in Benin City, where 3 inmates were hanged for murder and armed robbery. While death sentences are still regularly imposed by courts, the country has maintained a de facto moratorium on executions since that time. Governors are simply not signing. It is said that this reluctance is tied to personal discomfort with capital punishment, moral or religious objections, and pressure from the international community regarding potential judicial errors. And this reluctance has led to a massive overcrowding on death row across the country, with many governors preferring to commute sentences to life imprisonment rather than authorizing executions. So, Liborous, my big question to you, is it not their responsibility to carry out what the law says? And if we have a situation where we have a de facto moratorium on capital punishment on the death penalty, why do we still have it on the books? What do you make of this sort of moralistic, religious conundrum our governors seem to find themselves in?
Why you still have it, let me start from why you have it in the books. People are being executed daily. Forget the court pronouncement. I read to you, I said sometimes in execution of a court order or to quell riots, to stop unlawful, escape. So in some cases, you hear that armed robbers were killed summarily. And then they hide under those provisos in Section 33 to say they were trying to escape. After all, the man is dead, so they can't speak for himself. They were trying to escape. They can even drop guns close to them. And that's why Michael Kiro, when he was Commissioner of Police in Lagos State, once said, look, if a policeman who is drunk with a gun asks you, even as a lawyer, to jump inside the gutter, please. Because at that point, if the man kills you, we will say it's accidental discharge. Or we'll say it was, you were trying to escape. They can say you even, we were engaged in a gun duel with them. So they still hide under that section. That's why you still have it in our books. But the one that they say, okay, yes, the court has passed this one. Let the governor, sign a death certificate. They hardly do that because we want to be moral. We are more Catholics than the Pope in this part of the world. and we're highly religious, but less godly. And it brings me back to the issue of coming to beg for handouts. And I said it before. If you provide society with governance and you provide a system where the society will thrive on the structure of government, security and welfare of the people, you won't have people coming to beg you. You won't have people reverencing you as if you are a god. But because we have that mentality of, oh, look, if I do all of this, we'll all be on the same level. Why will I be that ordinary man? Why should I be on the same pedestal with him? So I need to make things a bit difficult. And that one is even worse than some of the crime that, will pass death sentence on. So that's why even the politicians now are telling you, no, so we are all humans. You see, yes, to err is human, to forgive divine. Wow. Even some of our churches, some of the atrocities they commit is worse than the ordinary stealing or armed robbery that you say, okay, yes, because if you go steal with firearms, and maybe somebody died in the process, you're committed to death. There's some crime that you can't actually, identify the victim, but there are so many victims of this crime in the society. And one of them is, when a society consistently, reorientate the mind and make people believe that it is no longer fashionable to work hard for money. And that if you make money, any which way you make the money, it's okay. And that's why people can kill young girls thinking that it will give them money for ritual. People can kidnap and then, believing that when ransom are paid, they make money and then use the money anyhow. Society, there are no consequences for it. Now, even that kidnapping, in most of the states where the penalty for kidnapping is death penalty, it still has not deterred that, unlike where properties are destroyed. You tell a landlord that if your property is used
for criminal activity,
that property will be destroyed. That when you say somebody will be the consequence of if it is that the person would die, a lot of people, that won't deters people even more than when you say penalty.
I was just going to ask you.
So these are some of the issues that the society, project, but the society in itself is the one, fighting against what it should be projecting.
I was just going to ask, but you've just, because I was thinking of, are there viable alternatives, to death penalties that exist within the Nigerian legal system? Because if truly this death penalty we're advocating for is truly abolished and removed from our books, what would need to be put there? Would the law, maybe the only thing that would be an option would be that life sentence, life imprisonment?
First thing, like I've always said, there are so many options, alternative to death penalty. Even the man who's passing the death penalty, in some cases, if you beam a searchlight on him, he's not supposed to be alive also. Yes, I'm telling you, because, so what we first need to do is to ensure that there is equality. If the rule of law is strictly enforced, some of these punishments will not be necessary. There should be equality. If there is equality in the society and everybody gets according to what the law has said, you won't even need some of this punishment. And I give you an instance with, when governors said we are going to demolish houses that are used as criminal hideout. But you find out, it brings me now back to the issue of morality. Oh, no, now, are you not a Christian? Are you not a Muslim? Forgive and forget. The Bible and Quran preaches forgiveness. Oh, it is the son that committed the crime, not the father. Why are you punishing the father for this? This man spent all his life savings to build this house. In some cases, you even see your sons doing these things and you look the other way.
You look the other way.
So, some of such instances where the law is enforced to the latter, there are no abegsa, there are no cutting corners. Those can actually deter you that you don't even need people to go to prison. We've seen cases where, especially when you know that it's only poor people that go to prison. I'm not saying there shouldn't be prison because there are some people who shouldn't live with humans.
Normal people.
And we should learn to ensure that these laws are enforced because somebody who kills another, for example, why should I say he shouldn't be killed? Because when you kill that person, it's gone, it's gone. But if you keep him in confinement for the rest of his life, that alone will serve as a better deterrence than when the person is killed. Yes. But you also now find out that even the prisons, where somebody is in prison and they are making calls, in some cases, they go out of the prison to commit another crime. So in such situation, people will say, you know what? I don't want a situation where this man is a terror, and if you keep that person in prison, he's going to commit another crime because the prisons are not strong enough to keep them. So just, eliminate them, take them off the surface of the earth. But when you have prisons that you hear of people saying Guantanamo Bay, but yet it is still there. And you hear of people saying, oh, there is a prison on the island that even if you escape from the prison,
can't get through
you can't get through the water, you can't get out. So in such cases, you say, yes, the prison is enough to hold these persons. But there are cases where even your prisons here...
Have we even built new prisons recently?
None. There was a time we mooted the idea of private partnership.
Yeah.
Where people can build prisons and then, government will pay.
That takes the American model, which is not... You now get a society to prison pipeline because you want them, they're making money.
People have their own private prison, I can tell you. That's why they tell yes, in Nigeria, depending on how strong you are. That's why you hear that National Union of Road Transport Workers had some of their members and kept them somewhere, and you wouldn't know. So you hear some people have dungeons in their house, they dig a hole, and then keep some people there. So in a law where the loopholes are more, the loopholes against the law are more than the law, and people can actually cut corners, then it becomes difficult to advocate for one thing. Like I said, if you say eradicate, and then your prison is not enough to keep
hold them.
Yeah, we already have over 3,000.
Imagine somebody in Warri prison going to commit a crime in Benin. And you ask yourself, how did he get out? And there's nobody's punished. There's investigation. And then once the boss dies on the social media, he ends there. And so he's on death row. He's out of prison committing another crime. And, so all of these things, the society. So in some cases, you just say, you know what, these people, you need to remove all of these people from the face of the earth. But the next question is, what if this person is actually, innocent?
Oh,
so it's the chicken and egg. It's a consistent debate that you're going to look at, and depending on the perspective you're looking at, actually.
Wow. All right.
Our final question.
Okay, so our final question. Can life imprisonment truly serve justice, for extreme crimes? Does removing the death penalty mean being soft on crime also?
I remember in 2002, somebody asked me this similar questions. No, yes, 2002. And I said, it depends. And the man started calling me, it depends. He said, all my questions, all these questions to me are usually always, it depends. So it depends on the scenario. We're talking about safe, protected prison. And where truly actions can be corrected, correctional centers, where you say, okay, for minor offenses, these ones can be corrected. For maximum offenses, then, behaviors are reviewed, paroles are granted, society can accept you back. And in some cases, even when the society accepts you back, it becomes very difficult to even cope in such society. But it keeps deteriorating by the day. So you now begin to ask, yes, if the prisons are actually correctional centers, and if the prisons are actually prisons, and the word properly so called, then you can say they will act as deterrent. We've seen countries where, it's acting as deterrent. Even people are so comfortable that, stealing is unattractive to them. The government makes life so comfortable that taking another's thing is unattractive. Because the consequences, the penalty for it is very, very strict, and there is no abexer. Because they say to whom much is given, much is expected. But when the society fails you abysmally, society also now creates a loophole for you to escape.
Yeah.
So in such cases, no punishment can be effective enough.
Wow. I don't think this conversation is going to end today because we did hit the streets to find out what Nigerians said. And as insecurity and other crimes, violent crimes, seem to become the order of the day, Nigerians will continue to have a conversation about the presence of the death penalty in our laws. And I wonder who's going to be strong enough to even say that our Constitution needs to also be revised to remove the death penalty. Governors are not signing, but Nigerians don't seem to be actively interested in also removing the death penalty. It's a conversation and debate that will continue for some time. Barrister Liborous Oshoma, thank you so much, constitutional lawyer, for joining us. Always ready to help us break it down to make sense of the legality of things in Nigeria. We'll wrap the conversation up here today. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Jasiri.